wasn't looking very good then, and no one thought that the Supreme Court would ever grant cert, and they did, and their decision was unanimous. I remember Justice Rehnquist's words even so clearly today. He said, simply because the government finds speech offensive does not give them the right to repress it.
Right. And so pivotal that if they reached a contrary ruling that said if you deeply offend or inflict emotional harm on public figures, then what happens to the press?
Well, what happens to the press is that means no public figure would ever have to prove liable. All he would have to do is go into court and prove you hurt his feelings, right, whether it's a political cartoonist or an editorial writer or what have you. You know, the press would have been virtually doomed, and I don't think it was the Supreme Court siding with me over Reverend Falwell. I think that they were looking at the practical implications of the decision if they would have ruled the other way.
Of course, that case is a big part of a very popular movie that starred Woody Harrelson playing you and the People versus Larry Flynt.
You know, I get letters all the time from law school professors who say the movie is required viewing and that they teach that course in First Amendment law in all the law schools. It's unbelievable because other than going back to '64 when prayer was taken out of public schools with the suit by Madeleine Mary O'Hare, there had not been a major First Amendment decision other than Sullivan versus New York Times, I guess you could say, back in that same period. Right. So we went almost a half a century without a major First Amendment decision.
You know, it's interesting looking at the way people have written about you, the way people talk about you, and you certainly have been a controversial publisher and pornographer, but there almost seems to be a dramatic difference in your public life or perception of you as a public man, pre-movie and post-movie, that there is much more sympathy and much more support and much more understanding, I think, of you after the movie. Have you, is that true?
I started to notice it after the movie and after my autobiography come out, but when I really noticed it was when I got involved in the impeachment fiasco and exposed Congressman Livingston and Barr and a bunch of those hypocrites just to let the people know who was trying Clinton that hypocrisy crossed party lines.
Let's talk about that. That's a big part of your new book.
I have had literally thousands of people come up to me, and they're little old ladies in their 70s and 80s, and they'll grab me by the hand and squeeze my hand and say, I just want to thank you for what you did for the president. You know?
Really?
And that's been the most gratifying.
Well, what you did was offer a $1 million reward to people who would come forward and reveal that they had had illicit relationships, sexual relationships with congressmen and women, presumably, or senators, or anybody in the administration, right?
Yeah.
What were you trying to accomplish with that?
Way back in '76, when Wilbur Mills and Wayne Hayes, two very famous congressmen, one ran the House Ways and Means Committee, and they were involved in sex scandals in Washington. And we were trying to get information there then, and I couldn't. Nobody was getting anywhere, and so I wanted to run an ad in the Washington Post. And Ben Bradley turned it down. And I asked a friend of mine who worked at the Post to talk to him and see if he would reconsider it. You know, I don't want nothing to do with Larry Flynt. So I wrote directly to Katharine Graham, and I said, how could you, as the publisher of a newspaper that epitomizes what the First Amendment is all about, you published not only Watergate, but the Pentagon Papers. You brought down a president, and now you want to turn down an ad that is clearly First Amendment. I just don't understand your rationale. I got a handwritten note back from her, which I have framed now. She said, "Mr. Flint, please resubmit your ad."
Wow.
So when I run this last ad on the Clinton impeachment, my attorney, everybody around me said, "Hey, the Times won't take that ad, the LA Times won't take it, and the Washington Post won't take that ad." And I said, "You guys might be surprised." And I didn't tell them what I was banking on, but I was banking on that there were still some people working at the Washington Post that were there when Katharine Graham said, "Run his ad."
And they were
They were there. So the ads sail right through for insertion on the Sunday edition.
So your point was that there are a lot of people in high places that have secrets they want to keep, and that it's not strictly one party or the other. And you know, it's interesting though to me about your whole approach. People who admire you, absolutely admire you for your strong stance on the First Amendment, but then go through your history and you go, well, we understand the point, but you sort of crushed a couple people's career in the process here. Was that a good thing to do?
Well, I think any time you take a public position contrary to the way you live your private life, you deserve the worst. Because hypocrisy is the biggest threat that democracy has. And that's the problem in Washington, you know. It's one big hornet's nest of hypocrisy.
Well, you have always published what you believed in your magazine, and that has always attracted, you know, lightning bolts and criticism. A couple of moments in the history of Hustler, which, you know, was more explicit than most mainstream magazines of the day, and you persevered, and you discovered there was an appetite for the kind of content you had. Early on, you had a huge financial success by publishing photographs of Jackie Onassis in the nude, someone had taken with a long-range telephoto lens that others in this country wouldn't publish. Fast forward to very recently, you are offered an opportunity to publish what purportedly are some compromising photos of Jessica Lynch, and you choose not to. Is that because you felt that what you did to Jackie Onassis wasn't right?
No. Jacqueline Onassis, public figure, former First Lady, she was an icon. And that's what people were buying the magazine for, not to see her in the nude, but to see the icon in the nude. You know, this was a whole different purpose than Jessica Lynch. You know, Jessica Lynch was used as a pawn for the administration to sell their war in Iraq. Sort of a modern-day Joan of Arc, I guess you would say. We found out all those stories were not true. All of her injuries occurred as a result of her Humvee turning over, and she never emptied her clip, what the enemy has said. It jammed, and not a single round was ever fired. You know, she was finally taken to the hospital. Even her captors made an attempt, you know, to give her back to the U.S. government.
And to her credit, she has told us all this in her own way and never pretended to be a hero.
True. But the reason why I didn't publish the nude photographs I had of her was she had not claimed to be anybody other than what she was, you know, and she was just simply being exploited by the military. Her sexual activity, you know, had nothing to do with as her involvement in the war. You know, I mean, there was no correlation.
And yet you bought the photographs?
Yeah.
To secure them?
Bought them, got them in my safe. I told her if she ever wanted them, she could call me, and I'd send them to her, but she never called, so.
You know, at the time of the movie, and of course you're showing great respect for a woman there, but you've rarely been accused